seeds and maybe a little bit about rooting clones as well.
Well, out in Oregon, we do a lot of cloning, because of the weather and whatnot. It's easier to clone and get your rooting system done inside and then put your plants outside. That way you have bigger plants. So come harvest time for us in October, which is kind of iffy for some plants, you got them nice and big, So seeding, though, Subby's a really good friend of mine, and seed's the way to go for us, also us outdoor guys, if we want strong genetics. We want to get our plants and have them have really strong genetics and get the big fat roots out of them. Seed's the way to go. So for me, I'm old school. I do the seeds in a paper towel and put them between two plates. And about 4 or 5 days, I got a nice little root and put that in some dirt. So I'm an old school dirt guy.
And that's a moist paper towel.
Yeah, it's a moist paper towel. You got to keep an eye on it. Once it dries out and your seed goes dry, it's gone. Just put it away and get a new one. Toss that out. And personally, I do about 2 or 3 seeds. Let that grow out, and then clone them and see if they're going to be females or males from there, and determine if I like it.
Cool. Icky, what insights do you have on either growing farm seeds or rooting clones?
Well, the first thing that's coming to mind is a common mistake that I see from a lot of newbies when they're taking cuttings, and that's the treatment of your mother plants. A lot of people feel that when they don't need to take cutting because they don't need to introduce a new plant into their cycle yet, they let the mothers just grow. And if you do this, you end up having really tall moms that you have to cut back. So what I'm thinking is make sure your canopy level is always level with your mothers when you take your cuttings, and take cuttings whether you need to or not, because the mothers need to remain stout.
Nice. Jeremy, any specific things about the Pacific Northwest and either rooting clones or starting seeds?
Obviously in the Pacific Northwest we have humidity up here. If you haven't noticed, if you're not from around here, I'm sure you have already. So that's always a factor dealing with humidity with clones and everything. I always have a dehumidifier in all my grow rooms, all my gardens when I'm curing my cannabis and stuff like that. There's just too much humidity in this area. So if you're not using a dehumidifier, I definitely do that. When I start my seeds, I just start them in a wrapper rooter cube. Just put them right in there, and they'll pop right out of there. You could just buy one of those 50 trays if you want. If most people aren't going to start that many seeds, so you might want to just grab the small pack, start about 6 of them, see what they root out, and like Raphael said, take some clones off them, sex them out, see what you have to work with, and then once you bloom them, then you can pick your phenotypes from there for sure.
Yeah, it's important what he's saying about taking a cutting of your seedling to find out if it's male or female, rather than actually flowering the seedling and then having to bring it back into the vegetative cycle. You've already stressed the plant out at that point. So taking a clone and flowering the clone is a perfect way to know what you're going to get from that plant without ever having to flower the actual plant that you took the cutting from. And as well as the humidity issue he's discussing, Scott, I think in Colorado you guys have the opposite issue, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a dry, high desert in Colorado. The biggest mistake that we see from people, coming from Florida or coming from the West Coast is they don't understand how to wean their clones off of humidity into that dry environment. All the time I hear people like, I had my clones for 14 days and they were perfect, had little rain droplets all inside my dome, and then you bring them out and within 6 hours they just, transpire and shrivel up. So there's a definite, method to the madness you have to get them used to that really, really dry environment.
So how do you avoid having that transition be a problem?
I mean, you take 48 hours and over, every 6 hours you increase the amount of airflow that's going through that dome so that the plants slowly, adapt to it. Nowadays with the turbo cloners and stuff, it's even more of important to have your just environment in your room be really good, because the second you take those clones and they go into the turbo cloner without a dome on it, I mean, those things will shrivel up within a matter of minutes. So Environment's always really key. You know, too little environment, your clones don't survive. Too much environment, everything rots.
All right, and Brett?
Yeah, for those that don't know, I'm from Washington. I grew up in Gig Harbor, so I'm quite familiar with your growing, let's say, climates here. For me, of course, we know in the Northwest, mold is very prevalent in our plants. If you're growing sativas or trying to grow them outside, it's too long of a season, and of course, you'll end up with moldy plants. So generally speaking, if I'm going to grow outdoors here, I try to find either an auto flower and or an earlier flower sometime the middle of September towards the end of September. For all those out there that are familiar with sticker bushes or outdoor growing around here, which is quite synonymous with growing outdoors, I'm sure you guys are familiar with a strain called the Pez or the Goo, which has rocked this place for a long time. So that's what I would suggest as far as if you're going to grow outdoors. Indoors, of course, powdery mildew, and of course mildew itself with condensation buildup indoors is a huge problem here in the Northwest. So keeping dehumidifiers, keeping your room at the proper humidities. I like to roll between 30%, 50%, no more than 50%, no lower than 30% humidity. And try to really keep control of the room, closed rooms. That's really kind of the thing. If you do get powdery mildew, a cheap kind of a quick way, by the way, we've been doing it up the past few years up in Humboldt. We've been using the leaf, the actual leaf from the cannabis plant. We've been taking the leaf, grinding it down, and mixing it with water, just pH water, and the mold has literally disappearing off the plant. Now, just think about this for a minute, you guys. This is just off topic, and I'll be done here. But imagine if Dr. Courtney, there's a doctor up in Mendocino, using and telling people to juice leaves, the natural leaf, for your body for health. So why wouldn't it work for your plant? So just try it out. Take a little bit of the leaf right off your vegetative plant, break it down, and then add a little bit of water to it. Spray it on your mold. I'm not, do it for a test, but from our results, unbelievable, unbelievable.
Interesting. I mean, they do use it's interesting. It's like a botanical extract made with cannabis.
And all it, again, is just the leaf off the vegetative plant. I can't believe what we're seeing, but totally black stalks or moldy stalks. Take the leaf, rub it on there until you're introducing it like you would on your skin. The raw leaf, just rub it up and down on there. It literally takes the black away, and it brings almost a new skin. In about 2 weeks, the skin will be thicker, and there will be no more mold there.
Interesting.
And back to that process of acclimation that Scott was talking about, it's kind of a misnomer in a small-scale world that we deal with a stage 1, a stage 2, a stage 3. And the process he's talking about is hardening off. So it's just acclimating that little cutting to a mid-stage environment. So realistically, there's a stage 1, be it clone, 2 being hardened off, 3 being flowering, and then 4 is actually flowering. And stage 5 is kind of like that later stage of flowering. So if you've got a huge warehouse, you can't keep those new plants that just came into the 12-hour environment and treat them like the plants that have been on 12-hour environment for 6-8 weeks. And so there's a complete 5-stage process, but it's always about acclimation to the new environment.
And you're talking about a perpetual harvest where plants are in different stages of life throughout a warehouse type environment.
Absolutely, 5 distinct different environments.
And what are ways to control environments in rooms that are that big? If you're talking larger than, let's say, 10 to 20,000 watt grow lights.
Well, first of all, what I'm investigating is not producing the heat and stuff from those lights to begin with. So, it's all about efficiency, cost of production. So if you don't create the heat from the light, you don't have to get, X amount of tons to cool it down. So proper airflow, proper filtration, and everything else. And
does that mean keeping the ballasts in a different area and using
absolutely,
digital ballasts?
Digital ballasts, or even in some environments, like a hardening off stage, you might use an induction light or a high-grade LED or something like that, just to minimize the heat, minimize the power consumption, so thus lowering your cost of production.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, then let's get into a little bit about the vegetative stage, which is prior to flowering, where you're building up a root system.